here I'm joined by our incredible panelists, Raysana, Hurtado, Amador from the Senior Product Manager at Intel Corporations, Prabhat, Head of Engineering at DataStax, Masood, a co-founder and CEO at Tara.AI, and finally, Eldon Richards, CTO at International Decision System. So with that, I would like to also give some quick introduction by our invited panelists themselves, starting from Raysana, Prabhat, Eva, and Eldon. Go ahead, Raysana.
Hi, everyone. My name is Raysana Amador, and I'm really happy to be here with all of you. I like to introduce myself as a master problem solver, and I think that starts from the fact that I'm dyslexic, and I had a really hard time in school all my life, so I had to be a master problem solver of how to survive a system not made for me. And that's actually been really good because now as a product manager, I constantly have to be a problem solver and think about how to challenge the status quo and ask why do we do something the way it is today and how can we make it better? But most of my career has been in product. I started in a venture capital firm in New York, Alley Corp, and then I worked for one of their portfolio companies, Guilt Proof, a startup in fashion, and then went to product development and production in fashion goods, so apparel and footwear, got my MBA, and really then got the bug for EdTech and trying to get back to the community that really I feel needs to be disrupted. And so went to Intel, joined in a rotation program to learn as much as I could about technology to one day bring it back to education. And now I'm in a horizontal group working on software developer tools, all open source. And one of the verticals is education. So happy to meet all of you.
Hi, so I'm going to go next. So hi, this is Prabhat. I'm located here in Bay Area, San Jose, California. My background is mostly in technology. So after school, I worked at Red Hat for like 6 years, and then I always wanted to do a startup. So I left Red Hat to do a startup back in 2011. Called InstaOps, which was about mobile application performance monitoring. InstaOps got sold to Apigee. Apigee is now part of Google. Then I did another startup called Woodrick. Well, this one I did not start, but I joined very early as their CTO. And Woodrick was into this customer experience management phase. So if you know about like SurveyMonkey, Medallia, think that for like SaaS products. That's what we're building. And last month, not last month now, it's been 2 months. In December, we got acquired by a company called InMoment. And the company is very happy and everything. But then I wanted to get back to the database land. And basically, so I have joined DataStax recently to basically head their data streaming product. So that's what I am. So my background is purely on software and technology.
Hi, everyone. Great to be here. So I'm Eva Masood. I'm the co-founder and CEO at Tara.AI. And in terms of my background, so I started my career at McKinsey, just kind of looking at large enterprise systems. And basically, over my career, I became pretty frustrated with existing tools for developers, in particular with Jira and the Atlassian tool stack. So my co-founder and I, we set out to build a better Jira, and really starting with speed and performance, as well as predictions at its core. So that's how Tara.AI was born. So we went through Y Combinator. We are backed by, we're venture backed. We've raised 13 million, and we actually launched our product last year. We're also hiring. We're hiring engineers, data scientists, product managers, and designers as well. We grew 1,500% in the last year with COVID and everything going remote. People just needed a better project management and overall product development tool. So Tara currently, I mean, we went from 20 organizations as customers to just over 5,000 in the last year, and we launched on end of April of last year. What I'm excited to delve into today is talking about how founders can start by creating an MVP, validating their early theses and market, and basically building full-fledged product, as well as finding product market fit. So great to be here.
All right. Hey, hello, everybody. This is Eldon Richards, and I am the Chief Technology Officer at IDS, International Decision Systems. And I have been working in technology for a little over 25 years, so kind of the grandfather of the group here, I think. But during that time, I've had the opportunity to be involved with creating and launching dozens of software products. Most of these have been B2B, and this has been in a variety of different settings. I've spent roughly half of my career in large enterprise, but also I've worked a lot over the last 10, 11 years, have been a combination of working with acquired companies that were venture-backed and PE-backed companies mid-size. And that's included a lot of work in terms of scaling and maturing organizations and their products, as well as launching a lot of new products from those organizations. So I'm thrilled to be here and happy to share a few thoughts and experiences with you all.
All right, thank you all. Really appreciate for your quick introductions. I just wanted to get started in terms of sharing your interesting experience on developing your product from inception to the first release, and this can be the current product that you are developing or some of product that you have developed past few years in your career. So I just wanted to have that kind of the question going to all of you. Maybe I'll get started from Raysana, and then we can move around.
I think something that's interesting about a product that we built from conception all the way, or from 0 to 1, what I found interesting is more about the differences of how different people think. So like between a product manager and an engineer, and marketing and all the different functions, for me, that has been the most interesting learning at Intel. Software product management is fairly new, the product management function. And so I think as I think about all of you trying to build a company or building a company, understanding that there are different functions and those functions have very different ways of thinking about a problem is real, and it's healthy to have that tension. So for instance, I came in, we had a product that was already being developed by our software development team. And I didn't understand why we were building it. And they just wanted to build something cool, and they were already at the how, and it was super, it has all these trinkets in it. And we realized once we launched it, which was only a few months into me joining the role, that it wasn't really a business feasible thing. Like that's a big side of building a product it's cool if you can feasibly technically build it, but is it solving a problem that someone really has? And is it enough of a problem that someone's willing to pay or have switching costs? And I think that was a very interesting aha moment, because for me, I always go in thinking, why am I doing this? But not everyone thinks that way, and that's okay. So as you go in as a founder, make sure that you know that it's a healthy tension, and the people that you're hiring around you have it's okay for them to think differently than you, and make sure they are. But that was an interesting moment for me, at least in this group.
Right. So maybe Prabhat, do you want to share this similar experience too?
Yeah, well, I have had multiple experience on that line, where I've been fully surprised by what I thought I knew I was building versus what actually customers wanted. And I give you one of those examples. So last start of Woodtrick, we had built one product which allowed you to basically get customer feedback from your users. So DocuSign, Zoom are using that product to get the feedback from their customer. And then the aha moment we had was, well, these DocuSign kind of companies, they get like millions of feedback on monthly basis. So there's no way they can humanly look at all the feedback and make sense of it. So we thought we should build a machine learning powered product which can do the sentiment analysis on those customer feedback, do the classification, and it will be no brainer. We'll sell it to them. We build it after a year. Actually, none of our existing customer bought the product. All the customers who bought our product was the customer who had similar volume, like large volumes, but they were mostly like B2C kind of thing, right? So even though we knew based on our own user base that this is what they need, but they were not willing to buy, and it was because they were so used to the product that we had built already. For them to see that analysis done in a new sort of reporting and everything was a big shift. So like we were never able to tap into that, right? So this is just an example of, even if you solve the problem day in and day out and try to understand, you think you're building it for them. It's not for them. So then after 6 months of launching the product, we actually focus our effort a lot more on the B2C side of things, where these users could import their customer feedback data and see some analysis very quickly, right? So the point I'm trying to make is that even if you're the domain expert, what your users need varies across segments. So you just have to be mindful of that. So we learned our lessons very quickly, and then we have to build sort of a different persona, a different persona of the product on that. Yeah.
Thank you. How about your experience on the Eva on your side?
Yeah, I actually really resonate with what Raysana said, in particular about hiring contrarians and people that have different opinions. I think one of the things that happens when you want to build a well-disciplined early product org is that you need to bring in people that, yes, believe in the vision and the mission, but at the same time, they, firstly, they need to be much smarter than you in a specific or a certain domain. And the second piece also is that when you're building out your first product org, I think one thing we also realized was that having the specific domain knowledge from that, for example, for us, it was the developer and the collaboration space. And we found that our early product team didn't necessarily need to have that depth and breadth of experience in the developer space or in the collaboration space. Like a lot of what they had learned in product and built as a discipline could be applied here. So I think one of the things that we did was we really hired for intellectual curiosity and for the first product team. And that's when we went from idea to MVP and to our first product, it was just the founders kind of my co-founder Sayed and I noodling away and talking to users and customers. Then we brought on 10 engineers and again kept noodling away. And what we did was we basically built this early access program. With the early access program, we had very early on, it was about 100 developers using the product. And it was very hard to get those early customers and users. Like we really had to knock on doors and try to get try to use our own networks. And it was interesting because I think once we built that early access program, that's what kind of became the feeder essentially for us to understand, like, what would it take for these users to switch over from Jira or Trello or Asana, and why would they switch over, and what is the deep value prop that we're offering to these teams. So being able to kind of understand in that early access program, what were the certain levers, and we ran it for about 4.5 months. But very quickly, we started seeing that those users were automatically adding other users from their organizations. The team started growing. And then April 30th was when we launched our V1 of our beta on Product Hunt. So as you kind of think about that, early launch process, and then even building out the team, one thing at least that we did was once we had the engineers on board, we brought on our first early product team as well simultaneously. And that was, and we structured it with that early access beta invites, so invite only. And then from there, we went into open access. So we tried to have as much structure as possible. But I think, you just can't predict either, like what kind of uptick or what kind of just demand is going to look like from the user side. And in the early days, it was really hard to even convince like 2 developers to use it. So that was my experience.
All right, thank you. I'm sure, Eldon, you have a very interesting story on that front here.
Yeah, a couple I'll mention real quick, and I agree with what the others have said about, it's really about solving important problems, right? What problems that people or organizations are willing to pay for, right, in order to have help solving that. One fairly recent one that we did here at IDS last year, right at the beginning of the COVID pandemic, one of my peers had an idea to help our industry. So we sell software to equipment finance companies and banks and so forth. And when the pandemic hit, their customers were under stress, and that stress was uneven. And as different governments and different locations were applying different rules, and the public in various areas were reacting in different ways, it was a very uneven situation. And so these large organizations that might be working with thousands or tens of thousands of other companies that are borrowing money from them, had some unknown amount of risk and an uneven application of that. So this peer of mine came up with the idea for a visualizer for that, kind of borrowed from some of the the pandemic trackers and videos that you guys have all seen. But this was combining data that we had about or that our customers had about where their assets are and who's borrowing them, what industries they're in, where the locations are, how that aligned with what was happening with the pandemic. And we built the product, this visualizer that would allow them to click in, see the hot spots where they had a lot of risk to their business and drill in and see who they needed to contact, who they might need to work with in their customer base in order to keep them whole, keep them in business, and and keep a customer and keep themselves in business as well. We built that product from the day that the idea was mentioned to me to when we launched it and had our first customer up was 5 weeks, which for a 40-plus-year-old company, that was really fast. We're used to doing things on a very different time scale. So that was a lot of fun, but it solved a really important problem. We actually gave that product away for free to the industry to build goodwill because they were under stress. On the other hand, I've dealt with other fun ones that were really large. One of those actually is what Hira's got us introduced and brought me to Stanford to take some classes. We had at my previous company at Recondo, we had a good set of automation products that facilitate interaction between hospitals and insurance companies. And there's a lot of stuff that happens behind the scenes to get medical care paid for. And we had some good automation there, but there was a particular problem that was just emerging to initiate what's called prior authorization. Before you get an expensive procedure done, the insurance company normally needs to give prior authorization. The issue we had was that you needed to answer a whole bunch of questions about these patients, and the data about that wasn't in any sort of structured format. We didn't have NLP capability in our company. So we said, how do we solve that? And we had to do that on a very tight budget. So that actually led me to taking some courses at Stanford, both on disruption and utilizing new technologies, as well as some of the AI technologies. And we built the product and substantially reduced the time and effort and cost for hospitals to take care of that, so they could treat their patients faster and have less risk. So both cases we were trying to solve important problems, but very different time scales, very different amount of effort, and I think that's an important lesson for us as well, right? Is that we want to solve it as simply as we can. We don't need to throw a lot of technology at it per se, but sometimes you do need to do that, right? So.
Yeah, thank you, Eldon, for incredible insights, right? So just follow up on that. So while you went through that amazing, development cycle for years, right? Do you want to share some kind of the best practices or the framework or processes that might be, good for our, founders on the audience side who are looking to build their first MVP as they wanted to take from, 0 to 1. Side of those product development. So any insights on that?
Yeah, you bet. It's really when we're going from 0 to 1 or to a small n, it's really about being able to pivot fast, right? As some of the other panelists have already mentioned, at that stage, we don't really know what the product is, right? We think we know what the problem is, needs to be solved. We may have some ideas about how to solve it, but it takes the ability to iterate really, really fast. So we're using a tool called the Lean Canvas. It's a pretty well-known tool, very simple, kind of a one-pager, to describe the idea. It does allow us to quickly answer questions. When I say quickly, we usually fill these out within a couple of hours, with a few people working together on that. But it helps us understand whether it's something worth pursuing and whether we're solving a good product, a good problem, and get after it. And then when it comes to the technology side, it's really about that agility, right? Trying to keep a very small team, a very open mind, so that we can pivot, change our minds, and not hold on to our preconceived ideas until we know that we're solving the right problem in a suitable way. So I think that's really what's most important at that stage.
Great. Yeah, thank you, Eldon, on that front, right? So I want to come back to Prabhat around to strong acquisition we went through, right? As the founder moved from more from architecting product from 0 to 1, what are the fundamental steps they need to put in place in terms of like selecting infrastructure choices, right, or platform tools or technology decision they have to make? So any kind of recommendation from your side?
Yeah, sure. So one of the things I have always wanted to make sure that as a technology team, that we are not dependent on one sort of cloud vendors to the point that we cannot move from one to another. So for example, at Woodrick, at my last startup, right, we like when it came to picking up the database solution, when it came to picking up a messaging solution, we never picked anything that was specific to Amazon and Google, because we wanted to be able to serve our customers across different vendors. That's number one. Another good side effect of that is that there's a big cloud war going on between Amazon, Google, and Azure, right? So they want lots of startups to come to their platform. And we actually at Woodrick, we got $120,000 credit from each of the vendors, each of these vendors. So what we did was in the first 3 years of the startup, we actually shifted the load from AWS to GCP to Azure as we got the credit. And for a startup, like to get a 300 to 400K of savings in a couple of years is a huge deal, right? So one of the insights I would add is that don't be so tied to one vendor that you cannot easily switch from one to another. Another advantage of having like cloud neutral technology like database, whether it's a Postgres and queuing solutions, that when you move from one to another, your application will actually work very similarly as you go from there. So as a result, you don't have to hire or train your existing lean team to learn new technology. It's like, the operation side is handled by cloud, application side, you're gonna do that yourself. So that's the one of the things I thought we did right, which really helps us on the infrastructure cost side. Second thing is, as you in the earliest stage, I think usually people have like a sprint, and at the end of the sprint they will have the demo. I think in the beginning the sprint needs to be 1 week, actually even shorter, because people just don't. You think you understand what you're building and you think what your teams are building, but what you ultimately end up getting from your team is not what you thought. So the earlier you can check on this, the better it is. So even for right now, I'm at DataStax, but DataStax as a company is a big one, but the product portfolio I'm launching is a brand new team that I have built from scratch. It's like 5 of us. At this time, we are doing the weekly sprint, and every Friday we do it, and that gives us idea. Everybody gets an idea, oh, this was not done right, we should fix it. So when we come on Monday, actually everybody's on the same page to what was working before and what's the goal for this Friday demo. So that way, actually you're not building in vacuum, you're building in a collaboration with other people. And what you're building actually is helping you get your team on the same page, which ultimately helps you build the product faster actually. So those are the 2 things I would mention.
Yeah, that's
I just wanted to
go ahead.
I just wanted to second what Prabhat said. I can't agree more. Actually, that's what our platform does. It helps companies sprint. And one of the things that that we realized very early on was how important it is to have rituals in place around your velocity. And what that means is, you know, from story time to the Monday demo to weekly sprints and to daily stand-ups. You know, it really builds that culture of motion and movement, and it also allows you to. So one of the things we also did is we did a weekly change log and a release log. So when you go into Tara.AI and you click on updates, users are able to immediately, like our community is able to immediately see what we've shipped during that week. And so being in that weekly sprints mindset, I think changed things drastically for us, and we were able to move much quicker. And I think especially early on, you know, I've heard companies try to think of like the 4-week or the 6-week sprint mindset as well, and I can't agree more. I think it needs to be as short as possible. The other thing also is, I think that what really helped with our growth was going serverless from day one. And you know, it just kind of removed that headache from for our infrastructure engineers from having to worry about spinning up new instances and even spinning up new servers. And then the other thing we also did was we're on Firebase, and being on Google Stack meant that we didn't need to specifically create new new logins or auth. And so now, you know, you can basically just kind of log into the platform using your Gmail or even your Outlook or Hotmail account. And so we were able to kind of roll out the sign in with other auth systems pretty quickly. So I think, you know, the more that you can use existing systems and basically, you know, just reduce the, essentially, like, you know, just reduce the amount of overall work that needs to get done. Another thing we also did was we looked into, we've also used quite a few open source libraries and open source frameworks as well. And we've kind of customized them and adjusted them to our platform's use case. So that's another thing I'd add on the engineering front.
All right. Thank you, Eva. And I want to come back to you again, right? So I'm very curious on this sort of the question I have, since I know you're in the hyper growth phase right now, in terms of like top down versus bottom up product growth lead. What's your perception and takeaway on that? To you know, any insights on that you wanted to share?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think one thing that we realized very quickly was we needed to build something where people could immediately use it. So you could pretty much sign up on your own and start playing around with the platform fairly quickly, and then start to invite and kind of, you know, grow from that one developer to a team to multiple teams in the org. So what that meant was we needed to have a seamless onboarding flow and process where, you know, users didn't need to hop on a call or a demo, or just, there was basically no interaction with a human. And I think, you know, that is my personal opinion, and it's a controversial one, is that in the next 5 years, we're going to see companies completely do away with the whole request demo framework. I think that it adds unnecessary friction to products that frankly should otherwise have freemium plans, and users should be able to use them. I think the friction is that, you know, you need to wait until you talk to a human. You have to schedule a time to talk to a salesperson, and then of course, you know, the other thing is that you typically talk to an SDR and then you get passed on to an AE. So I think that enterprise software is going to look more and more like consumer software, and that means that you need to meet the consumer where they are, and you know, as end users have more and more power in organizations, and they don't need to go to IT, or they don't need to go to higher ups to purchase software. It means that you're going to see this bottoms up proliferation of software. And I think it can't come soon enough. I think that, you know, there needs to be a transparent pricing, or, you know, if you are a free product, you need to make it very clear as to why you're free and what, you know, your overall plans are from a roadmap perspective. And then B, with the pricing plans and pages, you should have a way for customers to sign up and use your product. I think that's what truly enables bottoms up product-led growth. And I think it's something that we've seen companies like Slack pioneer in the space.
Yeah, the only thing I would add to that is that whenever we had this free version of product and then we had the paid one, for some reason, there was expectation mismatch, and this might be applicable to others as well, where free people, they want to use product for free, but they also want the same level of support. And if you don't support them, then they'll go on Twitter and bash you that, oh my God, this product doesn't work and things like that. And they demand that. So I think I still don't know what the right answer is, how do you maintain the balance between having a free version of product and how much energy you can put on the support side of this, because then you also have to support your paid customers. So I don't know the right answer is, but that's something to be mindful of as you have a free tiered of the offering, I would say.
Okay, so that's good. Thanks for additional insight, Prabhat. And so right now, I think we all in the panelist side, we are all agreeing in the point that product development is pretty much like highly collaborative process, right? So this is something I wanted to hear from PM side as well, in terms of when you take a look at the prioritization of like whether communication or having a shared vision is more critical than focusing on customer obsession, which is nowadays most of the folks say human-centered design or customer-centric development. How do you make some kind of decision around prioritizing which one is more important from PM standpoint to the other side of the house? Maybe Raysana, you can add on that.
Yeah, from the product manager side. So as a product manager, you have a lot of different hats on. And so you are a program manager, you are a mini CEO. Everyone argues different things, but you're thinking about, first and foremost, why are we solving what we're solving? So the customer human-centric design thinking methodologies is top of mind, but communication is so key. Communication is hard in general in any type of relationship, but it's even harder with what I explained before when you think differently. And I say what our product vision is every single day. And somehow at the end of the week, someone asks me, what are we doing and what's the objective here? And it's, that you think that you've communicated something correctly because that's what you think, but a lot of times you'll be surprised that you haven't. And if you aren't all on the same page, if my software developers don't understand why they're building what they're building and what the objective is here, that's a failure, and not a good one, because failing is good when you're iterating quickly, but not when you're failing because of lack of communication. So I didn't really answer your, it's super important as a product manager to balance all of those things, but if my communication isn't on top of mind, and I'm not communicating what the customer needs are, then I think that then I've failed in my role.
Okay, thank you. And this might be more relevant now to from our audience perspective. Eva, I want to come back to you again. It's more like a rapid fire type of questions, right? So how do you find technical co-founder, or what came up first as product or funding? Do you want to share some additional insight on that too?
Yeah, and I'm also happy to take one of the questions that's come in too. So I think so I actually wrote a Medium post about this on finding a technical founder. If you just Google my name, Eva Masood, and Medium, you'll find it. It's I spent quite a bit of time writing that post because I also took some of the experiences that other founders have had finding their technical co-founder. But I think the first piece is working with someone that, and this could happen as a former colleague, someone that that first say it. We actually went through undergrad together, and so I think the most important thing is you need to find and work with someone that you have really good rapport with, because this is going to be someone that will be your main ride or die partner for at least 10 years. So that's how I would see it. Now, in terms of product or funding, I've seen both instances. I mean, the first company that I built it with zero funding, and it was all it ran entirely on revenue, and it was completely bootstrapped. And Tara has been a different journey and a different story. So I think the most important thing versus what came first, whether it's product or funding, I think you want to be on this cadence of building consistently. So being able to validate certain theses that you have and de-risk by achieving certain milestones will always mean you'll get just better quality investors in your rounds, and you'll be able to select who you want to work with. So that's at least my thesis here, and I think the more that you can kind of reach your product milestones, and then in parallel raise your rounds from people that provide strategic value, that's always a given. Now, just one of the first questions that was asked was, how do you take your first product to customer? What is the correct process? I think there isn't really a process in here as such. I think what you're really looking for is what is the pain point that you're trying to solve for the customer, and is the product as it is in this, in the current phase. And it could even be like something, YC says this very famously. So when we went through YC, one of the things they told us was you don't necessarily need to build something that is fully automated or, is completely working. Like even a Typeform or a Google form can be a product. And that can be one way for people to just kind of interact with you and show demand. So, some very early versions of products can just be kind of stitched together. And so it doesn't need to be something that's completely full-fledged. I know PagerDuty, in the very early days, very famously, like they were just kind of in the back fixing issues for the customer so that it could show, so that the product would show up a certain way in the front end. And all of that was pretty manual in the early days. So I think, just being able to figure out what is the core problem you're trying to solve, and can you build something on a small scale where people find value and they're willing to use it. That would be how I'd answer that question in terms of getting your first product to customer. Now, the second part of the question would probably be that how do you find your first customer? What I would say is go with who you know. So if, especially if you're solving a problem that you faced individually as a consumer, then, great, then you can be your first customer basically. But I think going with who you know means that you kind of start talking to your network, trying to even find people of similar minds that are hanging out in communities. So, Facebook groups, Slack groups as well that exist, community forums as well. I know Reddit is great. Like there's so many threads, so many subreddits where people are kind of sharing what they're building and getting feedback. For us, it was actually Hacker News was our first dev community. So yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, Hira. And this is the follow-up. I think on the Raysana, I just want to hear about the especially around this. Don't shy away from failure, right? And I'm sure this is the more relevancy to our current founders who are trying to build their first MVP. Not shying away from failure means more like embracing it and also like learning from it, right? It's the more like heart of retrospective. Do you have any kind of recommendation or some of the use cases or example that you wanted to share, or some additional insight there?
I could take this one. Failure is so important in our team. So to back up, we're an incubation group. So everything we build, we have no idea what we're like, and a lot about it. We don't know the problem we're solving for. We don't even know if it's going to pan out. And so building the hypotheses and testing quickly, which some of the panelists talked about, without even building any code, like either doing something like Dropbox did and build a video and say, hey, wouldn't this be cool? What do you think? And see the click-through rate, or doing what Zappos did, like the Wizard of Oz, not building any backend and just having a front end and seeing the demand there. And seeing, like, for us, every time that we built something, and I've like drawn a back end of an architecture with my architecture team and gotten feedback from the developers who I'm trying to solve a problem for, that is really quick and easy to see how quickly you can fail. Even when and that's so important, that feedback, but making sure that you frame why you're testing out what you're going to fail for. That's really important. And sometimes you'll be surprised. But yeah, even doing UX walkthroughs in our documentation, it's something that's really important, is that my developers understand, my audience understands how to build this software. And if my documentation stinks, then that's a problem. So watching a developer, the end user, go through the steps of the documentation and having the painful experience of not understanding, and my developers being with me, watching the end user have that problem and fail is so important, because then we all realize, oh, something that seems so matter of fact, so perfect is actually not perfect for the people that we're trying to solve the problem for. And so failure is extremely important, as long as you have a real test on what you're trying to do. It's not just like going out there and seeing fail quickly, but make sure you're testing and have a plan to how to fail quickly.
Yeah, that's a great insight. And so I think on the Eldon side, this is more on the innovation Pacific Ops, right? I wanted to hear from you in terms of outside in versus inside out innovation model, which one might be more relevant these days as per your experience of running different product development cycle, right? And also building product, customer focused products there.
Yeah, good question. So I think there's always a case for outside in, right? Customer or market into the company. However, one of the things that I've seen, and this is probably more important in more established markets and less than in when you're creating a disruptive product, is that, and maybe in both, but when going from an outside in perspective, one thing that I've seen a lot with established markets is that customers are often not thinking big, right? So they're giving us feedback about small things that would be helpful, but still kind of in the same mindset of what they're doing today with the products that exist today. And so I think that's where there's a case for us to try to marry both of those together. Sometimes you do need somebody who can be visionary and kind of say, hey, let's try this. I think that always has to be balanced with having a good ear to the market, a good ear to your customers. So I think everybody's been kind of talking about, so we can't just go out and build it and expect that they're going to come, right? We've already heard about some failures of that. But I think there really is a case for us trying to do a little bit of both. Always listen, but be willing to be bold and to be visionary and try some of those ideas, because you're not always going to hear that from outside.
All right, thank you. So I want to come back to Eva. Probably you might be the unique panelist in our case where you're actually using Tara as a platform that uses, if I'm correct, right, machine learning to help out the organization to get engineering work done. So just tell us, like, what's the latest magics that you're sharing to the world?
Thanks, Hira. So basically, there's really two areas where we're differentiating. One is that we provide basically like predictions on your sprint. So what it does, it starts looking at as you start sprinting on Tara, it starts looking at your past sprints, looking at the effort that was completed by your pods or your teams of engineers, and then it starts to recommend certain effort for your future sprints. It also starts to give indications on when you, for example, overloaded your sprint, or if it believes that you haven't adequately added enough tasks in the sprint. For future features, we are also considering basically providing recommendations on which tasks should be added into a sprint and how your sprint should be essentially loaded or populated. But the other piece also is workflow orchestration. So this is something that isn't out yet in the product, but this year what we're planning to introduce is autopilot functionality. What it basically does is that using GitHub Actions and an integration with your CI, it actually starts to do orchestration of workflow, which is basically, what really happens in engineering is you start with an issue or a task, and then where you essentially hopefully end up is with a closed PR that is basically merged into production. And so we're looking at that, that whole flow. And the goal is to basically do status automation. So you basically don't need to update a task or an issue in terms of the status. And then, if you tie it to the environment as well, it can basically look at whether something is in staging, development, or in production, and also, continue to do that orchestration piece. This also relates to dependencies. So for example, if someone is working on a backend task that then over time needs a front-end developer to, let's say be assigned to it, we're also looking into how you could do automated assignments based on the dependency piece and based on workflow orchestration. And that's really interesting, right? Because once you start doing it at a larger scale, at larger organizations, what we've realized is that it's a huge pain point. Like we interviewed about just over 300 teams at larger organizations about this. And so I think it's a big pain point. And the other piece also that we haven't even is not part of this year's roadmap is effort estimation. That's also a really big problem, right? Like it's very difficult to do adequate effort estimation and sizing for a given task. And then the other piece also is like dependencies and dependency mapping. So I think there's the way though we do think about it is that we believe AI is a feature. It's not the product. And so if you'll notice that front and center in all of our, even in our product marketing, all we talk about is, the problem that we're trying to solve for the customer. And the magic just kind of, if the user or the team believes there's magic happening, great, but that's all in the back end. So at least that's our thesis, that we don't need to lead with the fact that it's in any way AI or ML driven. What we really focus on is the problem that we're trying to solve. And actually this is something that we learned the hard way. We've been going through, like we went through several pivots, and one of our earliest theses was that you could basically build a platform where all you're doing is predictions based on an existing Jira instance. And we found that people are so frustrated with their workflow tooling that they would prefer something better. But then the other piece is they don't trust the predictions as well. So this is why I think it's really important to be nuanced in the recommendations that are made in the platform. And if you are building AI or ML-led products, it's very, very important to think about the user experience and lead by design. Because it's really interesting studies on this. If the user sees too many recommendations from the platform that they don't trust or believe, they lose faith in the product and they stop using it. And so it could even become an impediment to growth if you don't do predictions the right way. So that's how we think about it.
Yeah, thank you. And just a quick reminder on the our audience side, I will be taking some of your questions that you have submitted throughout Q&A chat window. Before I go there, I just wanted to have a quick follow-up on the Prabhat, your story behind. I think this might be more impeccable to our founders, first-time founders, and I do have a visibility in terms of like a couple of incredible ideas that I truly see that's going to change the world. Some of the ideas in our program as well. So in terms of your two strong acquisitions you went through, right? So from getting a first customer through product launch to the acquisition, can you share us some of the story around like how long it took in terms of your first acquisition versus second acquisition? This will give some kind of like experiential journey for our audience as well. Just
yeah. Thank you. Both acquisitions were like completely different. First one was by luck. Second one was like so much hard work that all the luck I had on the first one got drained. So the first one was the InstaOps. I was based in Austin, Texas. We built this mobile application performance monitoring solution. And my network and my co-founder network of people who are building mobile applications were using it, and they kind of liked it. So we had to raise fund. And back then in Austin, Texas, the VC scene was not great. So we thought we should come to the Bay Area and raise some fund. So we flew over there. And one thing led to another. We just happened to meet the CEO of Apigee at that time, who was thinking of launching similar product, building a similar product at his company. So you're like, you guys have exactly what I would like to build. You guys just starting up. Why don't you just come work for us? So that's how it happened. We came here to raise funding and got acquired, and that was amazing. In the sense that we knew what we were building. We didn't have the funding. And they knew what needed to build, but they didn't have the team. So it was like a perfect story for us. So in the first acquisition, I still think we got lucky that we got acquired, to be honest, because if you had not gotten funding, I don't know what would have happened. Second one, the wood trick that happened in December, that was a hard one. So we have been around for like 4 years. We've been growing. We become profitable, but then with the COVID and because of COVID and everything, our growth actually really halted. So we had to pick a choice between raising fund at the not so good rate or finding a buyer. Finding a buyer so that we could get the investors' money back. So we focused on this one because most of our competitors in this space had been acquired already. So there were only one or two independent software vendors left. So like just the market pool was there that it was going to be very difficult for a standalone company to survive on its own. So we started looking for parallel companies, talked to like 100+ companies, including Zendesk, HubSpots of the world, Salesforce of the world. Finally, we landed up at InMoment, who solved a similar problem. And that one was like just a difficult process of, getting an introduction, showing the product, showing the demo, showing the tech validation, showing to them that the team that you have is really worth having it, and all this hard work. And then you go through the valuation exercise of, okay, this is how long you have been here. This is how much you have raised money for. This is your revenue. So this is what your valuation is going to be. But one of the goals we had in both acquisition is that we wanted to make sure that all the employees that who have been working with us are basically taken care of, so nobody loses a job as part of the deal. Everybody has a basically good opportunity. And we always wanted to make sure that we get the investors' money back in both cases. First case was easy because it was kind of bootstrap. But the second one, we basically made sure that happens, right? So very contrasting a story between two acquisitions we had, I would say, but it's not an easy process. And once we started the acquisition, once we made up the mind at Wootrick that we're going to sell the company, it took us about 18 months to get there, actually. And that 18 months is very draining. You're building product, you're solving customer needs, you're trying to increase the revenue at the same time. You are basically pitching to all these companies and investors to buy your company. So it becomes challenging. But when you ultimately do it, and now that everybody in the company is happily working at the new company, investors have their money back, and everything, so it just makes you feel better.
All right, thank you for wonderful insights there, right? So I want to take a couple of questions from Q&A. I do know some of the questions have already been answered earlier, but one or two questions I'll just target to our panelists here. So in terms of how do you take the MVP to customer in a highly regulated environment? So anyone in the panelist side that have experienced those kind of cases where you have to work within the regulated environment and you need to bring the MVP to the customer. Eldon, I know like you're in the healthcare sector, this could be one arrangement, maybe spend a couple of minutes there.
Yeah. We, so I honestly don't know that has been a whole lot different. I guess it depends on the nature of the product. So we, within the healthcare industry, we often dealt with private data, patient healthcare information, which is regulated by HIPAA here in the United States, and other privacy laws in other places. And currently at IDS, we deal with the same thing with financial and personal identifying information. I think that the main thing is in those kinds of scenarios is to ensure that that MVP does appropriately consider the security and those regulations on there. So that should be kind of a basis. As far as the rest of it goes, though, I think that those organizations behave a lot like others, right? That are not there. So you have to cover your bases on those key aspects, but otherwise, it's an MVP. So you really want to you want to move fast and you want to keep it as simple as possible in all other aspects.
Okay. Thank you, Eldon. I think this question is more targeted to Eva for you. Do you see changes in trends in enterprise from a preferred vendor approach to something more open?
I think that's a great question, because if you look at, like, for example, IBM's approach, right? Typically you need to be a preferred vendor in terms of in terms of actually getting traction as a product. I think a really good example of this is InVision. I think InVision really structured their strategy so that they were able to go bottoms up and top down at the same time. So what that means is when you go bottoms up first, so Priya, who asked the question, Priya, when you go bottoms up first, what typically happens is that, with like a company like InVision, right? They, let's say, already have 15 designers already using the tool at IBM. And so once you hit critical mass, so there's like a number that you could assign to critical mass, but once you hit that number, that's when, the deal team or the sales team gets activated. And that's when, they'll probably talk to the director of design, or they may talk to IT. And so what's happening is that there's just kind of this bottoms up motion that's already been bubbling, and the individuals have already paid for the product using their own credit card and expensed it. And then, at the same time, the top-down motion is once you hit that critical mass, that's when an enterprise sales team activates. So I think that's probably more what the future looks like. I think Slack, InVision, so many companies have followed a similar model and approach. But what the base thesis of this model is that you still need to have a design-first, user-friendly product that is open for sign-up that people can start using immediately.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you, Eva. And I think we're on the top of the hour. I just want to take one last question from each of you. So this is more like if you have to advise in 2 words or 1 word to our first-time founders who are actually working on developing our MVP, getting out to the customer end, what would be that? So starting from Raysana.
Man, grittiness.
Don't quit. Don't be a quitter. So it's multiple words, but that's what it takes. That's what it takes.
You guys are taking my words, man. That is literally, I had grit and never give up.
Exactly.
Don't take mine now, Eva, right?
Right. Yeah. Thank you again. Right. That's how I think. I didn't realize the discussion went so quickly and still have so many questions and curiosity. But I think this is the part of the criticality of the discussion, and also as a founder need to focus on, how you're gonna develop the first product if you're thinking of as a visionary founder, right? And I really had this incredible time discussing with each one of you panelists here, and thank you again for spending some time with us, sharing your thoughts, insights, and incredible advice to our founders. And this has been phenomenal. I hope we can touch base offline at some point and regroup this kind of the similar kind of discussion in the future. So I truly appreciate all of you again, and also audience on the side joining from all over the world. So we're gonna have this video recorded available after the discussion. So a wonderful discussion today. Thank you, everyone, and I really appreciate your today's time too. Have a wonderful time out there.
Thank you. Good luck, everyone.
Thank you so much.